Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 22nd, 2012 Pittsburgh Board of Public Education Legislative Meeting. Before we begin this evening, I'd like to ask everyone to please turn off all cell phones and pagers or put them on vibrate. Would everyone please rise so we can salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley?
Here.
Mrs. Khaleesi? We'll mark her when she calls in. Mrs. Fink?
Here.
Dr. Holly?
Here.
Mr. Eisler?
Present.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Ms. Shealy? Here. Mr. Sumter?
Present.
Mrs. Azuda?
Here.
All 8 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Sumter to please share our core beliefs and commitments.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Azuda. There's a body of belief out there that if a board can increase its effectiveness, that will help to boost the achievement within the district. Ways boards can increase their effectiveness is to focus on major policy items and not get caught up in minutia or micromanagement. Others have also added that for boards to increase their effectiveness, they should develop goals. Others have said that they should develop beliefs. Others have said you need to take it a step further and develop commitments. From the year 2007, or maybe a little earlier until now, the board has gone through a process of training on goals, beliefs, commitments. They've been voted on, and they're on the district's website under the Board of Directors under Good Governance. The Pittsburgh Board of Education has a goal and a belief and is committed to educating all children to their highest level of academic achievement. Pittsburgh Board of Education has a goal, belief, and commitment to provide a safe and orderly environment for all students and employees. Pittsburgh Board of Education has a goal, the belief, and is committed to providing efficient and effective support for all students, families, teachers, and administrators. Pittsburgh Board of Education has a goal, belief, and a commitment to distributing resources in an efficient and equitable manner to address the needs of all students to the maximum extent feasible. And last but not least, the Pittsburgh Board of Education has a goal, a belief, and is committed to improving public confidence and encouraging strong parent-community engagement in the district. In our efforts to improve the governance of the Pittsburgh Board of Education to become more efficient and effective, we've developed these beliefs, commitments, and goals in order to boost the achievement of all students in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Will everyone please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions?
Hearing none, move to approve.
Eisler and Fink, all those in favor? Did you have wait a minute. I'm sorry.
Just a clarification for Mr. Weiss. As I was not here, I should not vote on the minutes, true?
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I thought you were putting your hand up to second it. Thank you.
Voted on this?
Yes. Okay, at this time, I'd like to read the statement of executive sessions. In addition to executive sessions announced at the legislative meeting of July 25th, 2012, the board met in executive sessions on August 6, 2012, August 15th, 2012, and immediately before this legislative meeting to discuss various personnel matters that may include, but are not limited to, administrative vacancies and positions opened and closed. The board does not vote at executive session.
The minutes show that Mrs. Khaleesi is now on the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler, or Mr. Weiss. We'll begin this evening with the committee report on education that is before you, submitted by Mrs. Shireen Cheely and her committee. I'd like to call on Dr. Lane at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. I have a few changes, corrections that I'd like to read into the record. Beginning on item 17 in the education report, my page number didn't copy, so I'm sorry I can't tell you what page that is, but it's Mercy Behavioral Health Dancing Classrooms Program. We'd like to correct the total payment amount to a not to exceed $34,000. That's the total payment amount shall not exceed $34,000. And in the table below, we're adding a school, its account number and the amount. The school is Pittsburgh Colfax K through 8. The account line is 4116-297-1190-599, and the amount is $3,000. In addition to that, we are pulling item 26, and it will be resubmitted for your consideration in September, at your September meeting. Also, there is a new item, number 29. It was a placeholder, and I believe the board members have that, and I think that copies have been provided for the public as well. Item number 37, also in the education report. Contracted services, page 3, previously approved by the board on September 21st, 2011. The reason for the amendment is to increase the number of surveys administered, additional consultant support delivering on professional development, and additional consultant support on rostering resulted in a $55,950 increase. It's on my list. And I'm being informed that's not a change, so I'm not sure why it was on my list to tell you about it, but I did.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. The items we pulled for further discussion were items number 26 that has been pulled, item number 29, and item number 37. Are there any other items we want to pull for further discussion at this time? Anyone? All right. Then we'll go to, since number 26 has been pulled, we'll go to item number 29. Career Connections Charter High School was pulled for further discussion. I will read the resolution at this time. A resolution of the Board of Public Education of the School District of Pittsburgh adopting the adjudication of hearing officer John S. Toohey, Esquire, with respect to Career Connections Charter High School. Whereas Mr. Toohey's adjudication concludes that, quote, the charter for the Career Connections Charter High School should not be renewed for another 5-year term, in that the school district has produced substantial evidence of compelling reasons for terminating the Career Connections Charter High School charter, in the sense that the violations of the terms of its charter and the charter school law are significant, material, and fundamental, end quote. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Public Education of the School District of Pittsburgh as follows. Number one, the Board of School Directors hereby adopts the adjudication of John S. Toohey, Esquire, in its entirety. Number two, the recommendation referenced in the adjudication is hereby adopted as the adjudication of the board with respect to Career Connections Charter High School. Number three, the board does not renew the charter for Career Connections Charter High School for the requested term. Number four, Ira Weiss, solicitor, is hereby authorized, empowered, and directed to direct proper notice of this adjudication and resolution by certified mail, return receipt requested to Career Connections Charter High School solicitor. Are there any comments at this time? Ms. Shealy?
Can I just have a point of order? Am I the only, I don't believe we received copies of that. Where? Of that resolution?
The resolution, you did receive copies of the adjudication.
So shouldn't we have received a copy of the resolution since we have a placeholder under number 29?
Well, we can certainly distribute it. The board deliberated, and until that deliberation was complete, which I was not part of, we could not distribute copies of the resolution until there was deliberation.
But my point is, the board did not receive, and if it's not just me, the board did not receive copies of the resolution.
That's correct.
And as we are the voters on the resolution, we're getting it now. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Shealy. Are there any other comments, concerns, questions anyone has? Mr. Brentley?
Yes, I just have a question for Mr. Weiss. Mr. Weiss, have you, your office and Mr. Toohey, have you followed every step of the Pennsylvania Charter School Law in handling and making the recommendation before us today?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Eisler? Mr. Sumter?
Just a question. I'm going to be abstaining on this item, but the question I was going to ask, because I was one that asked for it to be pulled, was does the administration feel that they spent adequate time in the review of Career Connections Charter School?
Yes, we do, Mr. Sumter.
Thank you. Were there any instances where questions were asked, where information was found not to be provided? Did anybody go further and ask those questions, or was all efforts exhausted to get information needed?
Mr. Sumter, in regard to the process that was used, the team did express the fact that, yes, that they felt that they had taken appropriate steps to get the information they needed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? All right. Moving on to number 37, authorization to amend item number 4, Committee on Education, Contracted Services, page 3, previously approved by the Board of September 21st, 2011. Reason for amendment is to increase the number of surveys administered, additional consultant support service delivering on professional development, and additional consultant support on rostering, resulting in a $55,950 increase, which is what Dr. Lane had read earlier. Any questions, comments, concerns? Mrs. Khaleesi.
For this one to be pulled for more discussion. I was hoping to get some information since agenda review, but I didn't. When will we have the results to these surveys?
Teachers currently have passwords that they do have access currently to their individual survey
I'm
results.
sorry, I can't hear her at all.
Mrs. Khaleesi, I was saying that teachers currently have access to their individual survey results. They have had that access since the end of June, and that we're currently working on a district-level report.
Okay, I'm sorry. If I understood you correctly, you said that the principals have their results and they've had them since June?
Teachers can...
Teachers.
Teachers
So they
can...
have their own results
That is correct.
on an individual basis.
That is correct.
So they received their individual results before the district saw the, comprehensive report or something? Am I getting that right?
Yes, the way this works is that Cambridge, which is the company that offers this survey, has a login website where the results are contained. And then in order to get a district-level report, we have to work with Cambridge to do an extraction of the data that then comes to us as a district report file.
So was that part of the original contract, getting that information the way you just described it?
Yes.
So when do you expect to get that?
So currently, Mrs. Khaleesi, we currently have what we would consider a raw data file that's getting configured by school-level results.
Okay, so when do you think you'll get results so that we can see them?
We anticipate sharing with the board in the next couple weeks the district-level results by school, not by teacher, but by school.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what she said at all.
I'll state it again to see if you can hear me. We anticipate having the results available within the next few weeks at the school level, not the individual teacher level.
Okay, so prior to next agenda review or legislative meeting, we should have some sort of form of the results of this survey.
That's correct. If you remember, Mrs. Khaleesi, we're actually bringing forward in the next month, this is just an addendum on the current contract, but we will be asking the board to approve a multi-year contract, and prior to that, we will share district-level results.
Okay, see, I remember you bringing that up at agenda review, which is why I'm a little concerned as well. I'm not interested in renewing another contract until we see something. I mean, we haven't seen anything. This is like one of my pet peeves. I really wanted to see what the end results of this surveys were. So that was my point. I wanted to know a more definitive date of when we would get this information. So.
Shealy?
Just on their increase, you're looking to increase the scope of work, but not the length of time that they need to complete the work?
On item number 37, which is the increasing the amount of the actual contract, we're still in the contract period through the end of next month. And the reason for the increased amount of roughly $56,000 is because we actually issued additional surveys than originally anticipated, and we actually had more on-site support provided than what we originally had intended when the contract was executed last year.
So there's not a need to increase the length of the contract. This is sort of paying for services that have happened.
Yes, they're in the process of invoicing us for the last payment on the account, and in that process, we're over. So because we're within the contract period, we wanted to pay for those services, and then we'll renew the contract for the new term at the end of next month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shealy. Dr. Hawley?
I too had some concerns about the extra funding for this particular board tab. The issue that I'm having, though, is that we are now at the beginning of school, and we don't have this information in the district yet. the teacher will get their own data. Will the teacher be able to get data about their particular school at all?
What teachers are able to see is their individual results. They also see where they score in relation to other teachers in their school, as well as comparative to the rest of the district. The tripod survey actually has 3 versions in early years for the early elementary, a middle elementary, and then a 6 through 12. So the way that they report the results is in those grade bands, so you get to see at your school, you get to see your results, your school's results for those grade bands, and then where the district averages when you log into the system.
See, and this is where I'm a little bit confused, because I haven't seen the questioning that was given to the teachers, and the real purpose for doing this is it almost like a satisfaction survey? Or what?
We do plan to give a more, I guess, specific report on tripod than we can do at this meeting. But what tripod really is a student perception survey. I know that our teachers had concerns too. Is this a satisfaction survey? Is this, I like my teacher or I don't like my teacher? It's not that kind of a question at all. It's more about students' perceptions of how learning goes in their classroom. And the tripod survey is in different areas around level of concern. I'm trying to think of the other. There were 7 C's. Challenge, how much challenge in this classroom, that kind of thing. The kinds of questions that are asked once the teachers actually got the information, I think they found very helpful. It provides a lens on teaching that we typically don't get through principal observation or other means. And so the tripod survey results is one of our other ways of looking at teacher practice. And as I said, I think our teachers have found it to be pretty interesting.
Okay, so when the teacher gets these results, an individual teacher gets these results, is their results shared with the principal? Is the principal able to see those results?
The principal has not seen the teacher's results.
Will the principal be able to see those results?
Later, but we believed that the first step was for the teacher to see it. And that was the way we felt was the best way to introduce it, and I think our teachers supported that.
And what are you going to do with the results?
Well, the part of the tripod is one of our multiple measures we're seeking for measuring teacher practice. And so we have principal observation. The RISE process is one of those. We're value-added measures, which of course we don't have for all of our teachers, but we do have for about 37%. And then looking at tripod is a third way to look at teacher practice. And so it's part of our way of getting of professional development and evaluation.
Now, when the teachers, excuse me, when you sent in the surveys, well, no, let me take this back. When you did the first contract with them, did you have a specific number of surveys that you would be giving them? And because I don't understand why they're charging us more for multiple surveys.
When the original contract was determined, we did our best to determine how many classrooms we were actually going to survey. It gets a little bit tricky because you do your best estimate, and the way that the tripod survey works is as long as you have more than 10 students in a classroom, then you can give the survey. So we did our best estimation, but we ended up giving, we lowballed that number. The other thing that happened is we had to do, because it was the first time in such a large, every classroom in the district actually received a survey that had more than 10 students. We had to reprint some of the actual survey responses because there were some rostering issues. So with the reprinting of some of the schools, like Brashear had to completely be reprinted, so did Alderdice. So that was adding several hundred surveys that we didn't account for. And then we decided to expand the training in terms of understanding reporting, which required Cambridge to come on site more days than was anticipated when the implementation went into effect last fall.
So when we do the new contract, we won't have this problem again. You'll probably know, you'll have a better gauge as how many.
Absolutely. We don't anticipate that, yes.
That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Are there any other questions or concerns dealing with number 37? All right, are there any other items anyone would like to discuss at this time on the Education Committee? Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I just want to mention, I mentioned it briefly at the agenda review, that's page 5, number 18, Center of Life, Reverend Tim Smith. Want to just simply say thank you to him for his volunteer services, and because at the rate we have him here, those are definitely at volunteer rates. And so I just want to encourage the staff that next time around that we find some kind of way, it may be difficult, but find some kind of way where we can begin to have a model or a level in which we work off of when there are professionals providing services to us. There are folks who have presented themselves to this district with similar services, may not be as direct contact with the students, and we pay 3, 4, 5 times the amount. And here's a young man, an organization, an agency in the thick of things there in the community, and we know of his work, but yet we have him here for almost a fraction of the cost. I mean, once again, just the cost of gas for this time period was going to take a big chunk of this. So I just wanted to say thank you to Reverend Smith, Tim Smith, and the Center of Life, and we hope that they continue to provide the needed services for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Are there any other items anyone wants to discuss at this time? If not, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Brentley,
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi,
Yes.
Mrs. Fink,
Yes.
Dr. Hawley,
Yes.
Mr. Eisler,
Yes.
McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Shealy,
I'm going to abstain on number 29, yes for all other items.
Mr. Sumter,
Yes, on the report as a whole, I'm abstaining on item 29.
Mrs. Zhu.
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We'll now go on to the committee report on business and finance submitted by Mrs. Khaleesi, Business Chair, and Mr. McCray, Finance Chair, and their committee. Before we begin discussion on item number 15, to purchase errors and emissions insurance coverage, which was a placeholder in last week's agenda review packet, I would like to ask Mr. Ronald Joseph to please provide the information to be considered this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Zuda. You were provided with the replacement tab earlier today. The period for errors and omission coverage was revised to read September 1st, 2012 through September 30th, 2012. The liability limit for this insurance is $3 million with a per claim deductible of $250,000. And the premium is $7,831. Thank you.
Could you repeat those, please? We don't have it, unless somebody has. Again, we don't have it.
It was emailed to us.
It was emailed. Oh, sorry.
I didn't get my email since this morning. I mean,
Then I'll read the resolution in its entirety.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Resolved that the Board of Directors for the School District of Pittsburgh authorize its proper officers to purchase errors and omissions insurance coverage for the Board of Public Education and all staff for the period September 1st, 2012 through September 30th, 2012. The limit of liability is $3 million with a $250,000 per claim deductible at a premium of $7,831 payable from account line 001 0201 010 2590 529. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shealy?
Mr. Joseph, is the date in the resolution correct? Should that say September 30th, 2013?
No, the date is correct.
So we are doing this for 1 month.
Correct. This is a 30-day extension.
If I can address this, we expect to have a full quote to the board well in advance of the agenda review meeting in September. Because of the extensiveness of the marketing of this, it was in the district's best interest to extend the existing coverage for 1 month, which the existing carrier agreed to do at a very reasonable premium. So it is a 1-month extension. It expires September 30, 2012.
Sorry, and I realize that you can't provide any guarantees, but at September legislative, we will see the full year's insurance coverage.
At the September legislative, you will either see a full year's quote, or prior to that meeting, you will see a recommendation for some alternate coverage. But one way or the other, this will be resolved fully and finally for a year in September.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Are there any other questions or comments on number 15? Okay, number 19 was pulled for further discussion at agenda review. Are there any other items we would like to pull for further discussion from the Business and Finance report? All right, then let's discuss item number 19, which was pulled. Any questions or comments? No questions or comments on number 19?
I think Mrs. Scalise might have something on that. Therese?
Thank you, Mr. McCray. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Yeah, I do have a comment to make on number 19. I think it needs to be recognized that Mr. Vassar worked very, very hard along with his team in getting us a $1.8 million savings by going back and renegotiating these transportation contracts. We should definitely commend him and his staff for this hard work that they've done, so we need to thank him. I was applauding too, just so you all know. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Mr. Eisler.
Thank you, Mrs. Scalise, for mentioning that, because we had hoped that Mr. Vassar would be here tonight, but he is taking his daughter back to college, so he was unable to be here. But certainly he should be recognized not only by this board and his staff, but also the citizens of the city who pay the taxes, because he really has done an incredible job at a very, very difficult time to reach this savings amount. So thanks to him and the entire team.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I also want to just give an early thank you to Mr. Vassar. As I mentioned before, this is the love-him-hate-him season. This is the time when parents will call when the bus is late or the bus don't show up, and they eventually will get a hold of Mr. Vassar and his staff. And then on the other hand, you'll have others who will praise him. It was perfect. My son or daughter had a great experience. We should also find a way to begin to put out the most important thing about transportation. When we hear some of the local shock jocks on the radio constantly talking about the city of Pittsburgh spends X amount of dollars per student, when you factor in the transportation, we have to also talk about what percentage of our budget is transporting non-Pittsburgh public school students. And we have to find a way, and Dr. Lane, I'm going to ask that you begin to work on that, because every time we mention transportation, it should be able to roll off our tongues. 73% are Pittsburgh public school students, 30% is not Pittsburgh public school. That's very important. So while Mr. Vassar is juggling to coordinate busing services and making sure that the stops are safe and all those things we need, he's doing it for other students as well. We don't have anyone talk about that. So I want to just put a word out to the parents. I am asking that the parents, for the first 30 days of this school year and every year, that they just take a chill pill. And let's work together. Let's allow his staff some breathing room. Let's keep our voices down when we call. Let's stop pointing any finger at the driver when he or she is late, and let's just chill until we can work out some of the problems that we have. So I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Vassar. and the staff, and we're hoping that the district and the parents would embrace them, especially this year, because there's so many things that are unclear in terms of where schools, who's going where, and what schools are open, et cetera, et cetera. So, thank you, Mr. Vassar.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Any other comments? All right, are there any other items anyone wants to discuss before we vote? Mr. Brentley.
I just want to ask Dr. Lane or someone who can just give me a figure this month on the amount of dollars going to women-owned businesses, minority-owned business, and/or small businesses.
Yeah, and I think that I don't have the report, Mr. Brentley, but I know the question was asked, I believe, by you at Agenda Review, and I believe there were not any this month. Is that correct? Somebody? Yes.
Okay. And in the near future, what's helpful to me, Dr. Lane, is if we can just simplify it in dollars. You know, if we can say this month, you know, 300,000 is going to women-owned business, 400,000 is going to minority-owned businesses, et cetera, et cetera. It creates a clearer picture for me. Percentages are very helpful, but when I know what checks are going to be covered and going to what small, struggling or minority businesses is much more important for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Ms. Shealy.
Just a follow-up to Mr. Brentley's question. There were minorities or women businesses in the education report, weren't there?
Yes, there were. This is in the business report.
So shouldn't that be included?
Well, we can talk about what you'd like included and what you would not like, but some of the businesses that we know, in fact, are run by minorities are not always certified under our process. And so we start mixing those things together. I think we just need to be really clear about what we're counting.
Thank you for that clarification.
Are there any other items from the Business and Finance report? Mr. Weiss, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy? Yes. Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Let's now move on to the report on personnel that includes addendums A and B that is before you. I will go in rotation order since we don't pull things from personnel. If you have any questions or concerns, we'll start with you, Mr. Brentley.
1 second. I do have something, but I have to locate it.
All righty. Do you want me to go on and I'll come back to you? Okay, Mrs. Fink. I'm sorry, Mrs. Khaleesi. Mrs. Khaleesi, do you have any questions on the personnel report?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Number 10, is this the same as the payments authorized tab that's, I believe, in education?
So on page 14, number 10, the extended day payment for Pittsburgh Perry, is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Did I hear yes?
That item is not contained in the education portion. It is a payments authorized in the personnel report.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear her.
The extended day payment, which is number 10 on page 14, to my knowledge, is only contained in the Human Resources report as a payments authorized.
And on page 15, number 2, forgive me, but what is educational scholarship agreement?
This is a provision in our paraprofessional contract that provides a modest stipend to paraprofessionals who seek additional education opportunities.
Oh, okay. And on number 3 on page 15, this is just an extension? Nothing changes?
Yes, it is an extension of time only. No other provisions of those contracts are adjusted.
Okay, and number 5 on page 16. Is this a reclassification?
No, it is not. Number 5 is simply there to authorize a change in title only. The previous title had just not been consistent with industry titling, and so it is a change in title only.
Okay, and then on below that, number 6A, I'm trying to figure out what the change is, because it looks exactly the same to me.
6A is a correction in salary from last month.
So last month the change of salary wasn't there, or it wasn't listed under change of salary?
Last month, it was listed as a change in salary, but the new salary was incorrect, and this corrects and establishes the correct salary for the individual who is transferred.
Thank you. On page 17, number 2, when you have removed and replaced, do you mean that the people listed under removed are leaving those positions and the replacement are those who are taking their place? Is that what that means?
These were all adjustments to the summer programming. At the time we make those approvals, the staffing for our summer programs is fluid and runs really up to the point where those programs start. And there was some authorization of some individuals who ultimately did not work in the program. And after the approval, we went to our list of people ready to step in should there be vacancies, and so we needed to authorize those names. And so that's how the removed and replacement, what that's capturing.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. I'm sorry that I had to do this on the floor. I didn't have a chance to get with you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Mr. Brentley.
Thank you. I have questions on page 15, number 3. Dr. Lane, can you tell me, first of all, I'm concerned about such a long extension. This is a contract that extends the Office of Teacher Effectiveness until June 30th, 2016. What is the total dollar amount for this extension?
I'm sorry, Mr. Brentley, I do not have that number, but I believe that this extends our contract, Ms. Fuller can correct me if I'm wrong, through the life of the grant.
Okay. Ms. Fuller, can somebody tell me, where's the evaluation? I can't recall giving or receiving an evaluation on this, and I know we've made some changes. What's that process? Where do we?
This is extending the contract to the individuals, Mr. Brentley. Are you talking about their evaluations or the evaluation of the program itself?
Well, I guess both, because if we're extending an evaluation, it is suggesting that it is successful and it's moving and we're seeing progress. And I know that when we were hit a year or so ago, we had to tweak some changes. Then with this massive layoffs, which one local paper called the largest furlough in Pittsburgh Public Schools District, it put a dent in the intentions of the program. If those things are true, then how are we evaluating it? And we have yet to see an evaluation on its progress.
Well, we do provide evaluation information to the board fairly frequently as we report on what's going on, progress with the program. And so when we talk about the Empowering Effective Teachers program at Education Committee meeting, that is our purpose, to give you a picture on how things are going, what has been accomplished, what we're trying, and what has not. So we hope that it's kind of an ongoing process of informing the board of what milestones we've reached in that program. Items that even were discussed tonight were a part of Empowering Effective Teachers. Now, in regard to the furloughs, these individuals are on the actual grant that pays for the project. So even though I know this has been kind of a struggle for everyone when we have grant-funded positions, and what about operating budget-funded positions? I understand that, but these are people that are enrolled in working through with that grant, and that's what all of these folks are doing.
And so this is part of the Gates dollars. Well, listen, Doctor, do not get offended. Can I tell you what it looks like from the cheap seats where I'm sitting? It looks like we're spending just to spend the dollars that are there. I'd love to see bodies in the classrooms, especially why you were at the same meeting I attended today on the north side, and everybody continued to whisper, 30 plus in my classroom. They don't know how to handle that. And so I don't know if there's an opportunity to approach the Gates folks and say, look, we need to tweak this a little bit more. Can we use some of these dollars to supplement some of the things going on in the classroom? Because I am not suggesting that some of this work is not valuable, but in this day and age when you're reaching supermax in the classroom, we have to be creative in getting the bodies in the classroom. So I have some concerns about that, so I will not be supporting it, but I would love to see if there's an opportunity to talk. I'd love to see how many dollars are left in the Gates money, and if there's an opportunity to have a discussion. I mean, we can still make an impact. We're still thankful for the dollars, but the struggle and the need is in the classroom. And I don't want to mess up Dr. Holly, our educator's, her term about if it's not touching a child, then she gets it out of her school. I don't know. You can clean that up for me, Doctor. But the meaning behind it is all resource should be directed to those students and assisting those students. So I would love to see if it's working, the evaluation. I know some of the individuals, but we cannot be in the business of just using grant dollars just to spend money. I hope we're considering on using it in a way where we can get the biggest bang for our children. So, okay, if you could, I'd love to know, maybe at the next education committee, what is the balance on the Gates money? And is there an opportunity to have a discussion with the Gates folks to tweak the proposal, to make some adjustments, to move in a slightly different direction, but still staying on target with teachers? And if so, I would encourage the staff to consider that and find a way to bring some of those dollars in the classrooms. Let's see. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Fink. Dr. Holly.
Yes, and on page 12, number 2, number 3, and number 4. I'm glad to see that there will be some supervisory support in PE for our students and teachers, and also for world language. I see that you have a specific person that has the expertise in these areas. However, you don't have, I'm still making that same concern about librarians. We don't have somebody that's going to be, who is a librarian, actually working with library teachers. Do you have one and I missed it? Did I miss it? Pardon me? Where? Did I miss it?
We talked about this at agenda review. There is a gentleman who we're retaining or contracting with. It's in the payments authorized section.
But he's going to be doing
The technology systems, correct.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about helping teachers, librarians find correct books to use within our libraries, making sure that our libraries are up to date. It's more than just technology. We have two pieces here. I know we don't use the card catalog anymore, but still, the librarians need to have somebody that was a librarian actually working with them on the library skills, taking them into the next century. So, I'm just really concerned about that. I have no problem with these people doing this work. I think it's great, but I think that we also need to extend that to, and your music on the next page, on page 13. See, everybody has somebody, but the librarians don't. So I just wanted to bring that up. I just have a little bit of concern about that. Not that I won't vote for them, I think it's great. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Page 15. Is there any way, number 2, that we can expand this to, not expand it, but make the rate a little higher? I think $300 was there when I was a teacher. I don't know what you could buy, pencils? No.
This provision is contained in the collective bargaining agreement and would not be set by the board, but rather through the process of collective bargaining.
But couldn't we, just as, you know, good fellows, offer a little bit more or at least pay for a credit? $300 is nothing. I don't think you can buy books anymore with $300. I know you can't because I just bought some books, so that's not going to happen. I just wanted to bring that up. It has always been a wonderful program, but it's just a little bit of money, and I just wanted to see if we could bring that up. Number 3, I do have some major concerns with number 3. I have a problem with making a contract to give somebody a contract for 4 more years, when I don't know if the program is actually working. We have no data to support extending these contracts for 4 years. At least I haven't seen any. Now, if there has been some data that was given out to somebody, then, you know, please share it with me, but I have not seen any data to support giving somebody a 4-year contract, especially when we furlough people. So I have a real problem with this part. And I'm going to agree with Mr. Brentley in terms of the Gates grant. And I want to thank Mrs. Fischetti for actually giving me the grant to read. That grant, I have to say, is pretty open and pretty generous in terms of what this district can actually be doing for students. And I can't believe I'm saying this. I want to thank them for that grant again, because that grant is, we were under the impression that we could only use the grant for specific items, and that was true. But those specific items are very broad. And we actually could be using more of that money in classrooms. And so I'm a little bit disappointed that we're not doing that. But I am really not in the business of giving a 4-year contract extension when I'm not sure if the program, the way it is right now, is actually benefiting students in the district. And it certainly isn't when we are saying that the goal is to get an effective teacher in every classroom. And I've asked, I don't know, a couple of times what our definition is for an effective teacher. And we certainly did not have an effective teacher in every classroom in some of our buildings this year from some of the major problems that we've had over the past school year. I'm sure that it'll get better, but I'm hoping that it'll get better. But I can't see giving somebody a 4-year extension, even though the grant is for another 4 years.
Well, Dr. Hawley, I think the evaluation of the program is certainly something that we felt we had provided quite a bit of information to the board too on what the goals were, what milestones we've reached, where the work is going on right now. The tripod that you were asking about earlier is very tightly related to our teacher evaluation process. So I think if the board wants more information around what impact or what progress we've made with our Empowering Effective Teachers program, we're certainly willing to provide more of that. However, I would not want us to get into a conversation in regard to the people that work in the program and and kind of conflate these two issues. Now, certainly it is the board's decision as to how long or if they extend anyone's contract. However, these are the people that are doing a substantial amount of work to carry forward what we said we would do in the document that you read. And they are the ones that are driving that, because clearly those of us that have the responsibility and the duties in terms of the regular district programs and all the other things that go on in the school district cannot also drive the grant. And so that is something I think I'd like the board to consider.
I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about individuals. And I just want to make that very clear for everyone. I'm not saying whether they've done a credible job or not. That's not my issue. My issue here is that you're extending a grant for 4 years, which you don't know whether or not it's working. And let me go back and say this as well. When we're talking about the grant's objectives, we've seen a lot of PowerPoints as to what the district is actually doing in this office. And I agree with some of it I don't agree with, but that's neither here nor there. But the issue for me is that I'm not sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So it has nothing to do with the 4 people that are here. It has actually to do with what they're being guided to do through this grant. And does what you've written in this proposal, does it actually give you the results that we actually want, which is an effective teacher in every classroom? And I'm still want to ask the question, because I'm still looking for that definition of an effective teacher. What is it that we actually want to see in every classroom? And you may have multiple definitions for an effective teacher. But I'm just saying to you, we've never gotten that back from this office. And still, I'm still going to say that I have a problem with extending a 4-year contract, even though the money is there. We need, and when you're furloughing people, I mean, I think it's just unconscionable. And then number 2, I really don't know if what we're actually doing is being effective in the classrooms. So if you had told me maybe 2 years, I probably would have not even thought about it. But to go to 2016, I was like sort of shocked. Who gives out a 4-year contract? So I was a bit disappointed in that. So I probably won't be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mr. Eisler.
No questions on this report. Thank you, Mrs. Suzuta.
Mr. McCray.
I just want to recognize our employees that's serving in the military and thank them for a job well done.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. I know this probably isn't the place. We're talking about personnel, but I'm hearing in an educational context or a programmatic context that some board members or all board members are desiring to have more information so that we know where we're at any point in time on a situation, or if it's been provided piecemeal, at least collect it all so we can evaluate it in one context, not from month to month, but in one forum. So perhaps in future education committee meetings, that kind of information can come forward. And I would liken it to, I know the item was pulled out of the education committee agenda, the memorandum of understanding with the Human Relations Commission, and that would be a similar question as where are we, how much progress have we made in eliminating education disparities in the district. We know we're working at it, we know people are hiring and working on it, but just to know a quarter of the way, halfway, all the way, have we achieved our goal or not. So it seconds it to the point of having more information provided to board members, but it's a two-way street in that board members need to ask the right questions or have the information provided, not just information for information's sake, but information that will inform the board more than we have at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Ms. Shealy?
Ms. Fuller, my guess is that you've addressed this issue, but I have to ask. Under the first item, A, on page 1, these new appointments, are they recalls?
They are not recalls. There's a separate section in the packet for recalls. These are hard-to-staff areas, so there were a couple areas where we did not have individuals, and so there are a few new appointments on that first page.
Where are the recalls?
So, reinstatements is on page 6. I will say that there have been some recalls of teachers, and when they are prior to the first day of school, they show as transfers from the position that they held in June to the position that they are now able to go to in September. So in the more extensive transfer section, there are a number of teachers' names who did show as furloughs, but because there were resignations or retirements that allowed for them to not, in fact, be furloughed, they are shown as transfers, and the line is essentially removed from the record for the furlough.
Okay, thank you very much. Just for future reference, it would be helpful, because my guess is that you're not done with that process. It would be helpful to know how, somehow identify a number or quantity of people who actually are recalled, and I guess a total number at some point of how many teachers were really affected by the furlough situation. And Paris, too.
We'll provide a summary to the board.
Thank you very much. And then you brought up Part P, that is the additional report. It's right up to the yellow page. In here, I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of names. Were they all verified? Wow. Were they each verified for certification? For example, there are people who are going from an elementary school to a high school, or a high school to an elementary school. People going from a special school to a not special school. Were these person by person verified that their certifications are appropriate for their placements?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Bowler.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. If there are no further questions, Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote on the report on personnel, please?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes, on the report, I'll be abstaining on page 15, number 3.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Sorry, Mrs. Khaleesi? Yes. Dr. Hawley?
Yes, on the report as a whole. I'm going to abstain on miscellaneous recommendations number 3. And I'm going to abstain on addendum B, part B.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Zerda?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. I'd like to call the board's attention to the financial statement dated July 31st, 2012. Any comments? Mr. Eisler?
Question for Mr. Camardo and Mr. Joseph. The indicators this month are all to the negative. I know that you're pointed out that earned income tax is lagging, and a couple other issues. Do you expect this to turn around? We're going into the final quarter.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Joseph.
We expect there'll be an increase in earned income tax revenue as issues associated with the transition of the statewide collection system are resolved, so we do expect to be on track with our projections.
And either you and/or Mr. Weiss, with any of the appeals, are the appeals still going on, or have they been resolved, and do we now know definitively what the real estate tax will be, real estate tax income to this district will be this year?
The appeals have not been resolved. Only recently have the so-called informal appeals process been completed. It is too early to tell the degree of certainty we'll have on the certified assessment roll for 2013. Our office is doing all we can do to resolve at least major appeals in a way that will give some certainty to that process, but the short answer is the appeals are not resolved, and I don't think we can say with certainty where the tax roll will be up to January 1.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that question because we're now in the process of preparing next year's budget. And data needs to be had. We also know as a result of data that's in the education report this evening that there are decreases in federal funding. Obviously, we know what the state is for at least the first 6 months of next year, but there are a tremendous amount of unknowns, and I'm just wondering how realistic we are going to be in the preparation of the budget and the anticipation of the income for next year.
I think that within the next 30 to 45 days, you may have a better picture of what the major appeals are in the resolution. We're working very closely with Mr. Camarda's office and Mr. Joseph to achieve the degree of certainty we can, but there are a lot of appeals, and the process has not really started in earnest because of these informal appeals. But as I say, the major ones, which have the greatest impact on our tax base, we're trying to get some certainty to those.
And I know we went into some detail at the Agenda Review Committee. I mean, I'm concerned because we find ourselves almost in the same position we were in last year. There's more uncertainty than there is certainty based on what the real estate taxes are going to end up being, the assessments and everything else.
Well, yes, except we do know that the anti-windfall process will kick in for 2013. So at an appropriate time, we will be discussing with the board the millage adjustment, which is mandated by Act 1.
Thank you. And then I guess my next question or just recommendation to Mrs. Scalise and Mr. McCray is that I hope we are starting to take a look at some of the budget projections for next year relatively soon, since there are a lot of things to do between now and December. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Any other questions or concerns on the financial statement? All right, we'll move on. There is one new business item in our legislative agenda this evening that I'd like to read at this time. Resolved that the board's proper officers be authorized to execute a contract for grant writing services with Julie Albright from August 23rd, 2012 through August 30th, 2012 in an amount, what'd I say? Oh, sorry. Thank you. August 30th, 2012, in an amount not to exceed $10,000 from account line 1500-010-2800-330 to increase the district's internal capacity to develop a competitive proposal for the U.S. Department of Education Race to the Top district competition, which must be submitted by October 30th, 2012. Are there any questions or comments on this new business item? Mr. Brentley.
Probably a motion first.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Move to approve.
Eisler McCray. Okay, thank you. Mr. Brentley.
Yes. Dr. Lane, can you tell me, this is a contracted new employee or new service provider, not an employee, I guess?
Yes, this is a contract with a service provider that will just work for us on a short-term basis to help get this grant completed.
Okay. I don't know what department, and I got to go back from 14 years I've been on this board. I was in the department of Phil Parr, he was here. There were two young ladies that were magical in their writing and their proposals. I know when I first got on the board, everybody used to whisper, that's so-and-so, they're responsible for the money and the grants and so on. This is in that department that this is for?
Yes, and we do still have a grant writer for private sector grants and a grant writer for public sector grants, but our grant writer that would be responsible for this is already engaged in writing a report on our Gates grant that has to be submitted at about the same time frame. So clearly she can't do both at the same time. So she will oversee the writing of the second grant, but she needs some support.
Okay, so this request is made from them in that department?
Yes.
Okay, why am I forgetting the name of the appropriate? There are two young ladies, Doctor, they've been here. Kate Bauer and the other lady.
Yes, Kate Bowers and Erica Lagana. Erica Gentry Lagana will be the
Yes,
one
that's-
that will
okay.
be getting the support on writing the Race to the Top
Okay.
grant from this individual.
Okay, so this is the request made by them for assistance?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I support that. I know that they've been very, very quiet, as we say in the street, soldiers in terms of their diligence and working hard for the district, and it is my understanding extremely successful with their writing. And so it just concerned me when I witnessed another name. Well, if that's a request that they are making, then I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi, do you have any questions on this item? Okay, Mrs. Fink? Dr. Hawley?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. I don't know this Julie Albright, but the two of them couldn't write this grant? I'm looking at Ms. Fischetti. Isn't this your department?
It is, Dr. Hawley. I didn't want to jump in when Dr.
Oh, I'm
Lay was
sorry.
talking, but
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. Anybody?
I don't know if we'd even have the same answer, Dr. Holly, but
Okay, give me two.
I'll give you mine, she can give hers. Both of these individuals have a pretty heavy load because writing a grant is a part of what they do, but any grant we get requires reporting, and both of them are engaged in reporting duties right now. We have grants from our local foundations that we're busy writing reports on. That's what Ms. Bowers is doing. And then Ms. Lagana is writing a report for a big private sector grant. So the timing on this Race to the Top grant, you see how short the turnaround is on this. It came on top of a time where they're already fully engaged on other grants. And so that's why we're asking for this additional support.
Now, I know that this grant usually was given to states, and now they're allowing districts to actually write for this grant. But I'll support it, but I'm hesitant only because I have no data to go by as to why we're actually writing for this particular grant. Because I have to be honest with you. I hope that we're not going to hire any more administrators. And I just, more people to oversee somebody else, oversee that person, oversee this group. I'm hoping that this money is going, if we should get it, and I'm sure we will, I'm just being more faithful and hopeful that we're going to get it. I'm hoping that it's going to be used for classrooms, teachers, schools, materials, those kinds of things, rather than having somebody else come out and do more supervision.
Well, Dr. Hawley, we have not written for the grant, much less figured out exactly what we would spend everything on, but I will tell you that any grant is going to require someone to manage it. There are reporting requirements, there's money that has to be tracked. There are the fact that we say we're going to do some things, somebody has to make sure that those things are moving forward. So it's virtually impossible to run any grant of significance without somebody that's managing the grant.
I don't have a problem
But that
with
said, The other thing I'll say is typically, grantors do not give you money to operate your schools. They're not, they typically aren't going to give you people for, or money for materials for classrooms and those kinds of things. But I understand, your concern around this, and certainly as we think about how we could best situate ourselves to apply for the grant, we'll keep that in mind. But typically, it's to do something you're not already doing. So often you end up with additional responsibilities, and typically when there are additional responsibilities, somebody has to do it. So that's people.
I certainly understand that there has to be someone in finance to actually make sure that we're spending the money correctly, and they'll stay on top of that. However, I'm really concerned about the fact that to get a large sum of money, and then the only people that are being hired for these for this grant would be people in administration. I really want to see some of this. I want to see monies being used really to help children, programs being developed to help children in classrooms. If you're not going to do that, then I don't know what the point is. Because really the race for the top is really to help children. And that's all that I really care about at this particular time. I think we have enough people overseeing everybody.
Well, I'd just like to say that clearly, if a program is not designed to help children, I'm not sure why we'd bother. And the programs that we currently have under our grants, even though they may not put an additional teacher in a classroom or additional materials in that classroom, a program that's designed to build the capacity of our teachers directly does help children if it's executed well and we are successful. So we think that's incredibly important and touches our children directly. And our goal is with this grant, should we be successful, is to definitely help children in our classrooms. There'd be no other reason.
So at this point in time, even though you have a short turnaround for this grant, we don't have any proposal goals like on the top of our head about what we want to do with this money?
We met just yesterday for the first time to talk about this. And that was really not to come up with what do we want to do, but one, did we want to try to go for this grant at all? We had to read through the grant itself, see what the requirements were, what they're looking for, because it's really about you fitting into what they want you to do. And could we, one, think we had a chance of being successful at it? And secondly, did it fit with other efforts we're making? We believe that we can. We have a chance. It's highly competitive, so we're not counting our chickens before they're hatched, but we do believe that we have a shot at it, and we want to make it in such a way that it enhances learning for kids, and so that's the goal. But we'll give you more information on that as we flesh it out a little bit. But as I said, it's something we just started talking about ourselves yesterday, so I'm not really prepared to go into what might go into it yet, but we'll be working on it pretty quickly and provide any information. So I think the board might want to see some of the things they're looking for. That might be interesting to you.
Yes, that would be I would be interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mr. Eisler.
Thank you, Mrs. Asuda. Dr. Lane, and seeing some of the preliminary things that were written about this particular race to the top dollars going to districts, do you feel that we will not be held responsible for anything that went on within our states not getting raised to the top dollars? Do you feel that it is clear in the guidelines? I mean, from what I've seen, I'm comfortable, but I don't see it the same way you do. But that because we did not get it in the state, and we know the reasons why, I mean, it was pretty detailed from the federal government back to the state as to why, that those have all been resolved in the way this particular application is being drafted by the federal government?
Well, and I was on that early race to the top team for the state, and I think there was at least some belief at the federal level that the state hadn't initiated enough state-level reforms to qualify. But the state did get Race to the Top dollars just in this latest round, which of course is much less money than the first round was. I believe that the law that was passed around teacher evaluation was part of what had to happen in order for the state to be successful in retaining that Race to the Top, because a lot of this is around teacher improvement, teacher evaluation, and so a lot of Race to the Top has been kind of directed that way. That said, because we've done a lot of work in that space already, we think that might help us with this particular application.
Yeah, I think probably more than most districts in the state. Thank you, Mrs. Azuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Mr. McCray? Mr. Sumter? Ms. Shealy?
Did the grant specify the range of grant, the amount range for what they're looking to offer?
Yes, it did, and 10 sticks in my head. I think it's around 10 million. Is that right? Oh, I'm sorry, 20 to 40. So needless to say, we do want you to pass this item.
20 to 40 for on a district level? Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Glad you got that out. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, Mr. Shealy, or Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalasi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
The new business item is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Are there any other items to be brought before the board at this time that require board approval? Mr. Brentley?
Yes, following up at the agenda review I shared at that time, two resolutions that I wanted to put forward. This one is to simply waive the fees for the City of Pittsburgh's three midget football league usage of our fields. The three fields would be Peabody, Langley, and Oliver. As you know, that there's been a lot of mix-up. Those leagues are all volunteers, and in some cases, the request was made for the usage of the fields for 8 to 10 days, and some cases they received bills of $15,000. Keep in mind, they're volunteers. 80–90% of those students are students in the Pittsburgh Public Schools. So until or while we work through whatever we have to work through, this is a resolution that would simply allow them to finish through with their season with no fee involved. And just a couple of points that I've put together here, in waiving the fees for those three district fields, that the league or the teams would be required to hire 2 certified city police officers or security guards at each event that they are using the field. We will provide a full inspection the before and after the use of each of our fields. That's for this season. I probably think at some point I will probably move forward a little later on the year if necessary to really put something in place in terms of a full partnership with these individuals to make sure that this thing won't happen again. Also in the same, which is the same thing here, there were 2 agencies that also uses, the one is the first time using one of our swimming pools. And I believe there's a possibility that they may be hit with a very hard rate again. The other pool, and the name escapes me, but everybody knows one of the #1 volunteers in this city, Mark Rodakis, who is totally in love with swimming and teaching kids to swim. He uses one of these pools, and he's out teaching kids to swim. For those 2 uses, I do not have their names. I can plug them in at a later date, but along with those 3 fields and the 2 pools, I'm asking that we vote to waive the fees and then at a later date provide a permanent partnership with these 3 individuals so that we can continue offering these services to those kids in the Pittsburgh Public Schools.
Mr. Brentley, can you word that in the form of a motion, or would you
This
have
is a
copies you
motion
can
to waive the use. This is a motion to waive the usage and fees of the 3 Pittsburgh Public School football fields, which are Oliver, Peabody, and Langley, and also for 2 swimming pools. One I know is Perry, and the other I want to say Reisenstein, Peabody, they said Peabody, that's right, and Peabody. Each names I will provide at a later date of those individuals and the organizations they represent. Also included in this resolution that each would be required. For the swimming permits, they would be required to have a licensed or certified lifeguard, at least a minimum of 2 each time that they are using the facility. And for the field, they are required to have a certified security, 2 certified security / City of Pittsburgh police officers for each day. Those costs they will pick up on their own for each event. And the inspections, and they know about the maintenance of the building to take care of cleaning up and so on.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion on the motion. Mr. Brentley? Mrs. Khaleesi?
I'm not sure I understand exactly what the resolution is supposed to say. No need to repeat it. I can't support something that first of all, staff has made very clear we can't afford to do this. And furthermore, you're suggesting that we waive these fees for certain parties. What about the rest of the groups out there, or individuals that also used our properties and now are up against the same situation? And some of them have found ways of coming up with money. We've also been given some re-looked at. Staff did come up with some better rates to help this situation. So I would rather staff made the suggestion that they made and we follow with that. I'm afraid that I can't support something of this nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Mrs. Fink?
Something wrong with these things tonight. You had said it was for an 8-week period. How many days per week are they using the field? Yeah.
You know, if I said week, I didn't mean to say week. It is my understanding they made the request for, I believe, 8 to 10 days. They were using them for their home field games, if I'm not mistaken, because they actually practice at one of the city fields. But our facilities allow better crowd control for the event. And so, yeah, it is my understanding, 8 for game day. Yeah, I didn't mean to say weeks.
Okay. And is it, do we have to have a custodial person on duty when these games are taking place, like, you know, to open the restrooms or whatever?
Yes, we do. In order to open the restrooms, we have to have a custodian in the building. And while I have this opportunity, I'd like a little clarification on, are we talking the rent or the custodial charge, or both in the resolution? I think we need to understand that, so.
For the rent, we would waive for the rent, and for the custodial charge, we can pick up and find within the district a way to pay it for the custodial fees. Because it still requires the custodian, and I understand that's a union issue, have somebody open and have somebody close. But definitely for the rent, and then the district can simply bear that cost.
Are you finished, or? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Fink. Dr. Hawley?
This is really not a large sum of money for the district to assume, but it is a large sum of money for these teams to assume. Many of these teams are out early in the summer when school is dismissed in June. They're out in the middle of the street with buckets and hats. They're, trying to get funds for their uniforms. Also, they're out trying to raise money for to travel to the various games that they play. It seems as though some people may think that it's not fair not to ask them to pay, but the bottom line is that they don't have it. I mean, I don't know how in any other way to say it. They are doing the best they can with what they have. And I would rather see them playing an organized sport rather than being out on the street during the summer and during the fall. If you've ever attended one of their football games, you would just be amazed at the parent involvement that's there, the community engagement that goes on at these games. It's just phenomenal. And this gives the children a time to have some organized recreation under the supervision of young men and young women that really care about the children and the community. So I am definitely going to support this. There are times when, as a principal, I would actually go there and give out information to parents about things that we were doing at the school, because that's where they were on a Saturday morning. And not even just that, they actually do take their children out to practice. I mean, so it's something like this, that's a beautiful event for the children. So I'm going to support Mr. Brentley's motion, and I'm hoping that my board members will do so as well. And I'm hoping that the school district will find a way to make this work for the children in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holly. Mr. Eisler.
I'm not going to get into the intentions of the adults who work with these children, because there are a lot of volunteer leagues across the city, and this is not across the city. There are other fields that are being utilized, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Camarda?
I believe there are other fields that are city fields, yes.
The school district fields, when you say city fields. Are there other school district fields being utilized for youth football or any other?
The fields identified are the ones being used by the City League footballs that are owned by the school district.
There are no other ones being used?
I believe I know of at least one field up by Fort Pitt School that's a city-owned field that's being used.
And there's no other school district fields being utilized?
Correct.
None at all?
For these
except these three?
For these youth league.
Okay, and how about our swimming pools?
I'm not clear on the issue on the swimming pools. I was looking for the permits that were being referenced last week, and I'm not coming across those, so it may be something that's being anticipated, but I've not been able to identify specifically.
It's not the way I understood it, but I will take your word for it, but I want to be really clear about this. We have no idea what the cost of the district is. None. We have no idea what the potential liability issues are to the district. None. What the costs are that are associated with this is really the reimbursement of the salaries. If, again, Mr. Camarda, I want to make sure that I'm clear on this, because we've dealt with this over the last couple of weeks, and I think that you have reached a resolution with some of these leagues to be able to play utilizing city police and not our security, correct?
Correct.
We still have to have a custodian.
Correct.
Minimum amount of hours based upon a contractual agreement, right?
Correct.
To open the building for the restrooms and any cleanup.
Correct.
So we have no idea what this is going to cost. And there is a fairness factor because other pools are being utilized. I was under the impression that there were other fields being utilized also with permits, but maybe they don't have permits.
There are some other fields that we have. There's been some inquiries, but to the best of my knowledge, there's not a
Okay,
permit issued
fine.
yet.
Maybe it's just inquiries then. But I have a major problem with not knowing what the cost of the district is. I mean, we're just going around the table tonight on costs and worrying about costs, and here it is, we have no idea what this is going to cost this district. And there is a fairness factor with the pools because our pools are used by a lot of people, is my understanding. Correct, Mr. Camarda?
That's correct.
So to waive it for 2 and not everybody else, you think your phones haven't been ringing, wait till after this. So I just think that we have to try to figure out a way to do this, and I think I would like to hear, Mr. Camarda, how you've worked with these youth leagues and what resolution you've reached for this year.
What we arrived at, we met with the individuals who are running the Northside Stallions and the Northside Steelers. They came and met in our offices here in the district. We started what we originally had, where we had 2 custodians and our own security staff there, through some agreement of asking them to participate on some of the during game cleanup, and we've added additional receptacles at the fields. We were reduced down to 1 custodian, and within the Oliver Field, within the field for Peabody, and with the 2 of the teams are using Oliver Field.
Paying for the city police?
I did not discuss with them their relationship with the city. When there was a meeting before we even met with the city, and I contacted our acting chief at the time when we were having our meeting, and she was going to contact the city, say we would not have one of our security there. I did not ask if they were paying for the city police.
Thank you, Mrs. Asuda.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler. Mr. McCray.
Are these dates, are they retroactive? Have they already used the fields already? That's already started, okay. What about, are there healthcare professionals on site to deal with concussions and broken bones? These are little kids. They're developing right now.
They're not on site, but they will come. I'm a football grandma, so they do come when anything happens. They're there.
Call 911, yeah.
They're there. They're there.
Okay, that's all, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Mrs. Asuda. Excuse me. Before the motion was actually put forth, my thinking that was going to be more general, citywide, not specific to any particular teams, and that it would give the caveat that would offset the cost to those participants, i.e. the custodial cost, if those persons would be responsible for cleaning up. I wasn't thinking of the contractual agreement of having a person with a key that has to be licensed to open up the door or close the door, et cetera. If the custodial cost could be minimized to
Mr. Sumter, not to interrupt as you're speaking, but on that theme, when we met, I just did. I apologize.
No problem. It's okay.
When we met, one of the items we did discuss with individuals was not having any custodians at all. We were just going to reduce it down to who would open, and they did not like that idea. They actually liked the support and the individuals who are running the games, and they said no, that wouldn't work. So we tried that also. And they just realize the support that they do get, and it does help their activities run with our individuals there. They had great concerns if we didn't have someone from the district there.
The policy committee had brought this topic up on July 26 to discuss, and it was at a point of having Mr. Camarda's office to report back to us as to your findings or the results, because we were talking about offsetting the custodial costs, we were talking about porta-johns, we were talking about security, everything and that's why it's best done in committee to flush it out, to get all the particulars, to have the wording just right before you come into the legislative room and try to craft policy on the fly. Because of the urgency of the issue, which needs to be addressed, but not to overburden the district. And I think this comes close to another issue where a program was not being administered properly, and it's my understanding that the fees were not being charged last year or early, before April of this year, earlier that the fees weren't being charged. Now the groups are being hit with fees all of a sudden, so it's like the shock. And it's the same as when grading requirements weren't administered properly, and to not have the kids hit with a shock of what the requirements are to ease into it, you have that grace period. So it's similar to that in this, of that grace period while we're trying to work this out. My feeling is whatever responsibilities were of the school district that can be taken on by the participants that would reduce the cost to the district, however we can do that, to what maximum degree, if it's zero, up to whatever minimal amount to pay for that. At some later point in time, the policy committee can come forth with a complete recommendation on this item such that in the future for any and all teams, maybe that's a process or a procedure we'll go through that would apply to all, not just specific groups. So we did have some cost at that meeting that were shared. I think it was in the $5,000 range or maybe more than that as far as what the ticket, why groups such as these, when they're hit with a sticker price tag like that, would bulk because it's overwhelming, more so than paying for it on a gradual basis or knowing of it, when if you participated last year, you didn't know of it, and you're hit, all of a sudden this year, sticker shock. So as best we can do to craft this motion to address a problem, address a concern, but not to the point where it's a negative liability to the district. I mean, it's one thing to pay to clean up after there's a mess, and if that's what we're paying for, but if we can reach this happy medium that it gets clean at the least costly amount, that's what we should strive for. So I wasn't aware that the requirements, again, for custodians having to open the bathrooms or not. I'm looking at a situation where there's no custodians. The participants pass out plastic bags at the end of the game, the kids, the parents, everybody's walking around cleaning up the field. We look, say it's clean, everybody's happy, so it's at no cost to them. So that's what I was looking for. As best we can get to that's the ideal, but if we can get towards that, that's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
I'm going to answer you. The reason why we couldn't, they need the bathrooms, because for our fields, the bathrooms are inside the building. At the suburban schools, they have bathrooms attached to their stadiums, the way we would have it if we were at Couples. So that's why we need, and they need to have electricity. So the electricity is, again, is inside of our buildings. So the only people that could get access to that would be the custodian. So that's why they definitely.
Fully aware of that, because like I say, we were talking about the possibility of those teams renting port. No, what I'm just saying, you have to flush out all alternatives. You're looking at cost, benefits, and you take the best recommendation. So in the course of discussing it, it's best to have all the information up front rather than having part of the information. If you don't know that the bathrooms are in the buildings, you need somebody to open it, you can't enter that into the discussion. So thank you for that awareness, but we were taking that into consideration too. But all that information should be on this table right now for us to intelligently make a decision about it at the moment. So with all things considered, not knowing what the costs are going to be, hopefully it'll be minimal, but this was only a one-time item. It's only talking about this 8-week period currently. It's not something that's going to happen from this point forward ongoing, so we'll know how to deal with it when we actually change or amend or keep the policy the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Ms. Shealy.
Thank you. I think I need to agree with part of Mr. Sumter's statement about not understanding what these numbers are. This is a vacuum to me. I'm not sure what I missed, but I don't understand what the cost is, what we're trying to not spend or not trying to charge the teams, and if your agreement, Mr. Camarda, with the teams made a difference in the cost?
Our agreement reduced the cost where we were at $8,000 and $8,600 down to $2,900 and $3,100. So with the reduction of down to one custodian and elimination of security, that's how we were able to reduce the cost.
Are we charging both rent and?
There's a rental fee, and there's a fee for custodians. The rental fee of those amounts, it's $336 for one group and $366 for another. I think there's a slight difference in number of hours.
And you're just talking about Oliver Field, or are you also considering Peabody?
Peabody's costed out just about the same, so it's Peabody also. And we also have a permit for the Langley Field, which is costed out in the same fashion. So there's 3 fields that have permits right now, and they're all within the same range because it's about the same type of schedule, same number of hours, and the costs work out, within, a slight amount of money, the same, around $3,000.
And again, these are the only 3 fields that the leagues use?
I believe the leagues use at least
Or
the field.
of the district's fields, I'm sorry.
Those are the 3 that are the district fields used for these community equipped football leagues, yes.
Okay. So what's the purpose of the rent?
It's for the other costs that actually Dr. Hawley started mentioning. There's other support costs. We're running electricity. With one custodian, our costs, I think we're even generously under costing the rent of the custodial charges. But that's what we arrived at with the charges, what the hours were, and we leave the facilities. When we're done, they're clean, they're ready for school the next day. The Oliver Field, there's a lot of weekends that are Saturday and Sunday because they're sharing a field. There is a lot of activity that goes on. There's a lot of cleanup and a lot of generated materials after the game.
My fundamental issue, I think, is both, a couple of people have mentioned, is that these are not the only groups who would want to use our fields who can't afford them. And so I guess I'm not sure where the fairness to everyone comes in. And it just doesn't, I guess what I would, and to Mr. Sumter's point, coming through policy committee would have helped me to better understand what the realm of groups who are willing and want to use our fields for purposes that pretty much specifically serve our kids, but are not necessarily district functions. So it would have helped to have had the full information on that, and specifically the pools. I'm not willing to even address the pools in this issue. So, Mr. Brentley, I'm not even sure, but I would be more willing to support the field issues than the pool issues if we could separate the two and deal with the pools later to allow Mr. Camarda some time to work with the groups.
I'm not sure Mrs. Shealy's done, so I'll come back to you after she's finished.
Mr. Brentley, are you willing to separate the two, or is all or none?
These are kids in your community. Okay? These are kids who don't have access to swimming because of the ridiculous restructuring of schools around here, that are able to get into some of these schools and swim. Can't afford it. Can't afford it. Yes, I can separate it. It would be cute. But we're still putting some kids out there who need access and still need things to do. I'm not going to. I'd rather not. I'd rather not. But if that's an excuse you can use for not supporting, I don't know what else to suggest around here. I don't know. I have no, wait, let me finish. I have no kids on the league. I'm not selling at the popcorn stand. I'm not getting, these are Pittsburgh public school students that are in a league that can barely afford uniforms and insurance, using our fields, taking at least 600-800 of our students off the street and providing some needed services for some of these kids. And I'm going to stretch it and say 50% or more of these kids, this is the first contact that they will have with a positive African-American man on that field and teaching discipline and the different kinds of things that they have. It is on the field. I would ask you, on behalf of the students, I am begging you.
Asking you to separate the fields from the pools.
Shereen, come on, we know exactly what that means.
What you want to really put it out there, you're talking about being exposed to positive African-American males. The pool issue is not what you're dealing with.
The pool is a part of it. You
You
know,
specifically mentioned the person who runs the pool programs, who is a friend of yours, who I would just like to separate that issue so that Mr. Camarda could have an opportunity to work with him. The fields are issue one, and I completely agree with you. It's a lot of children who don't have the opportunity to be exposed to positive African-American male role models. So I am more than willing to support the field issue. It's the pools that I'm not clear on.
yes, I'll do that for you, Ms. Shereen. We'll take the pools out.
Thank you.
I'll agree to that.
To separate the pool. A motion to amend the item to delete reference to the pools would be in order. That's all, the only way I know to do it. Well, if the two of you are wanting to do that, that's up to you two.
What do you want me to do, Mr. Weiss?
I'll pull.
Fascinating watching this procedure anytime I do so.
Mr. Bradley.
What do I need? Tell me what I need to do. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it.
Okay. If the goal is to separate the pools issue from the fields, then I think the motion, if you're willing to restate the motion to make it refer only to the fields, and there would be a second to that, then that would be the simplest way to do it.
I make a motion to waive the fees for just the fields. Thank you.
Second.
So that's the motion now before the board. It relates only to the fields. The pools are not part of this.
Thank you. Mrs. Khaleesi, do you still want to talk?
I'm still a little confused here. Is this motion insinuating that only these three leagues on these three fields are going to have their, what is it exactly that's being waived?
I think for clarity, it's one league, but they use 3 of our fields.
I'm sorry, please repeat yourself.
It's one league, but they use 3 of our fields. Is it 2 leagues?
Thank you for clarifying that, but when you say we are waiving those fees, there's more than one fee there. There's a rent fee, and then there's the fee for the cost of the custodian, and I believe then there's the fee of the security, which I'm not sure how all 3 of these are divided. But that being said, my bigger concern now is, because my phone will ring as soon as we hang up, because I know that there is the Pittsburgh League that has been trying to afford, and they accommodate the same students, same Pittsburgh Public School students. Some of these students are teenagers and are adjudicated students that truly need the value of these opportunities, and we're not waiving those. So I feel like I'm being put in a predicament where, you know, I'm terrible if I don't support this, but then at the same time, I know there's a lot of other organizations that are in the same boat. I'm uncomfortable doing this. This is on a fly, and it's very uncomfortable, and it's putting us in a very uncomfortable position. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I do believe that from all the leagues in the city of Pittsburgh, these leagues only use Pittsburgh Public School facilities. There are other leagues that use city parks to play their football games. I know because I go to tons of them. Pardon me? Pardon me?
She said it's not what she was referring to.
Well, what is she referring to then?
I'm talking about leagues that do use our field, such as Couple Stadium.
Who uses Couple Stadium? What? Is it all the time?
As past president of the Beachview Athletic Association, I was in a previous life one of those folks that was standing on corners trying to collect money to have baseball, softball, basketball, and soccer. So I appreciate, Mr. Camarda, the effort that you have already put forward to reduce the costs for these two organizations to make them more manageable. I cannot, in good conscience, support this because one of the hardest votes I have taken in the last 5 years was the vote to eliminate our 7th and 8th grade baseball and softball programs. And we just did that a few years ago. And that wasn't a lot of money, and I just find it really hard to replace that money by picking up expenses for a non-Pittsburgh. And I get that they're our kids. I get that, because the kids in the BAA were our kids. But I find it hard to replace cutting baseball and softball for our middle school students and picking up tabs for a football program that is not a Pittsburgh public school. Even though it is our kids, I get that. But that's my personal challenge. Mr. Eisler.
I mean, one of the responsibilities we have, and a major one, is the fiduciary responsibility we have to the taxpayers of the city. And I still go back to what I said before. There is no fiscal note attached to this. We have no idea what it's going to cost the district. However, when this was first brought up to the board, Mr. Camarda, looking into it, I think Mr. Sumter summarized it well. Policies were not being followed uniformly across the district, let me put it that way, without getting into details, because a lot of it is a personnel matter. Mr. Camarda met with, there's more than one league, correct?
Correct, there are 2 leagues.
And you reduced the costs significantly, correct? In working with them, what they would do, including helping pick up trash and everything else,
Yes.
right? But when you talk about rental, you're talking about, as Dr. Holly pointed out, electricity, water, trash collection, a lot of things, including insurance to the district and liability issues to all of us. In your working with the leagues and coming down in cost, what was their response?
Well, they certainly weren't happy when we were done, but they realized the effort that was undertaken. We tried some of the other items we had talked at the policy committee, and they just would not be acceptable, the whole discussion about porta-johns and not having bathrooms and cleaning up themselves. So they really do appreciate what they are able to have as facilities, and we agreed that by the end of the season, they would be making attempts to make their payments, and we would address, you know, any shortfall or where they were at by the time next year's permits would be issued, to see how we resolve this first year. We weren't making them pay everything up front. They knew that we had to work through this, and we weren't stopping the games from beginning. The games were about ready to begin, and we have the same vested interest that's being discussed at this table.
And thus, again, they were willing to go ahead with the season knowing full well that they may have to negotiate with us at the end of the year. I mean, they know that there's going to be the fees. And they were brought down considerably because of your working out the arrangements with them, right?
Correct.
Okay. And again, we're doing this, no fiscal note, we're doing it for 2 organizations at 3 fields.
3 separate teams, 2 different leagues.
Okay.
Yes.
Not district-wide.
Not district-wide because they play, yes.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm not comfortable voting on anything if I don't know what it's going to cost this district and where the money's coming from. Thank you.
Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. The motion as stated is not in line with Mr. Camarda's recommendation or negotiations, and not in line with the previous motion. I mean, that's why creating policy is important. The language is important. You have to be exacting about what you're saying and take your time in doing it. You just can't say, let's do this, let's make it work, and if you don't like it, that's why you're mad and upset. That's not the way you do it. It has to percolate up. It has to have input from all sources. It has to, when it gets to this table, be a fine-tuned instrument. And how it applies to people, equitably or not, the implications to address, because this latest motion is saying all fees. That's not what we talked about before. We talked about, I guess, assuming, but if it's all fees, we're talking what, $3,000 per field? So we're talking $9,000 max? No.
It might be 12. I think we have 4 fields, right? We have Langley Field, Peabody, and we have 2 uses of all our fields. So it's
3 fields,
4 teams.
So 12,000 is the max. I mean, is that the total bill?
That's in the range of the bill.
Okay, so we do have an idea of the ballpark figure that we're voting on in total. The last motion did not include inspections, did not include, it was waive all fees for all the fields, for all the teams. That wasn't, the specificity wasn't the same as the original motion. This is stuff lawyers like, the exacting language and to be specific and how it applies and whether it's going to come back to haunt you later in time or not. If we can get the understanding, I don't know, it's trying to reach understanding at this point is very difficult because of the unwillingness of people to compromise or accept other points of view. So to just keep arguing and fussing and not being here all night on a one-item issue that if had it been vested before it got to this table would have had more success, so.
It wasn't vested. Oh, you don't, oh, I'm sorry.
Vetted,
I'm
say
sorry.
vetted. We're trying to vet it now. It hadn't been vetted to this point because all the information wasn't put forth. All the costs weren't put forth, all the particulars. This is the first time I'm hearing back from Mr. Camarda since we first told him or asked him to look into the matter. So what I mean is we're working at a legislative meeting rather than work first and bring the recommendations to the legislative meeting, really to the agenda review, then legislative. Should have gone committee, agenda, legislative. And by that time that it gets through all those hoops, it's a tight piece of policy, because that's what we're creating. We're creating policy. Really, we're doing just a waiver to one of our existing policies at this point in time. But even at that, it should be exact enough that anybody leaving this room understands what we're talking about. We shouldn't be guessing when we leave that door. Does it include that, or does this cover this? Or if there's something that happens in the course of exercising that waiver that's not in line with what we desire, who's going to be responsible then? So you try to nip it all in the bud on the front end rather than guessing or hoping something's not going to hit you on the back end. So that's just a comment on the style that's being put forth at this moment, that's all.
Mr. Camarda, can I ask you, what other teams, pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I think Mrs. Khaleesi wanted to say something, actually. No, I'm good. Okay, I'm sorry. Dr. Holly, it's all you.
Mr. Camarda, can you tell me, those are the 3 fields that the students use in the city of Pittsburgh, right? The 3 fields.
Those are our 3 fields. I think there are other fields.
Okay.
There are other fields being used that are not
Right.
school district fields.
Right, but those are the only 3 school fields that are being used.
That I'm aware of, those are the only ones
Okay,
that
is-
anyone has asked for a permit to run youth football on a Saturday and Sunday, all over twice, two different leagues, 2 different teams, Peabody and Langley.
Okay, so nobody's using the couples field.
No youth football league is using Couples Field.
Okay, so,
There are Pittsburgh Passion rented and paid the fees that were considerable. I think it was $20,000 or more
Those are
for their
adults.
season. But those were adults, but I was just,
okay. So we're only talking about these 3 schools. So, Mrs. Khaleesi, I think that answers your question in terms of being fair for right now.
No,
Do you-
it doesn't, but
Okay.
I don't want to interrupt you.
But I need to have the conversation with you.
That's fine, then. What I want to answer for you is, I guess where my bigger issue is that you have other groups such as soccer teams that'll come soon, and you've got other sports that are going to come and ask you the same thing. What do we do then? We waived it for these 3. Do we not waive for anybody else? And Couple Stadium is used by, you know what? I'm okay. I'm not comfortable giving to one group and not another. And I don't know if we can afford to give to others.
And that's what I was just trying to understand, making sure that all the football teams are covered in the city, that there's some place for them
At this
all to play.
moment, you have the football teams covered. What happens when you get the softball teams and the soccer teams? We're going to be right back right here. Why can't we just give staff just explain to them that we need them to come back and give us a better option than what, unfortunately, these people have been having to deal with. I understand what they're going through, but at the same time, you know, staff has been working with them, but they need to look at the overall view of everything before they say, okay, do this, because there is a financial impact, whether it's $12,000 or turns into $50,000. You know, we need to know that. We need to know what that impact is, and it's not going to stop at football.
Well,
It's not.
I think that Mr. Camarda has done that. So I'm not going to keep asking him the same question over and over again. You've done it, it's done. What we're asking for right now, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Brentley, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, we're just asking for this period of time for right now. And then we'll have to come back and really work on this for, what, is it forever? Is it forever? That's not,
That's how it is. That's how it's stated.
The way the second motion was stated, it said all fees, it was a blanket. It wasn't as specific as the first one, which said 8 weeks or 8 days, inspections, cleanup. It was, like I say, because of the frustration of taking so much time to do this, the second motion was not specific. It was second for discussion purposes, but it's a wild card motion.
Your microphone.
back to I'm just trying to make clarity, because I'm just concerned about these 8 weeks for right now.
We thought
And then we'll come back and work on the policy.
The thinking that it was going to be stated exactly the same as the first motion, except it would not cover the pools. It was not stated as such.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Eisler.
I hate to belabor this, but Mr. Camarda has gone back and worked with the leagues to reduce considerably. They are operating, correct, Mr. Camarda? Correct. They are going to be utilizing the fields. There's no stopping. What he has said is, this is what the anticipated cost is. And they have agreed, correct, Mr. Camarda?
Correct.
So, to me, it's really a moot issue. When this was brought up, and knowing that the policy committee could not turn this over overnight because we wanted to find out all the costs associated with this and what the costs to the district were going to be, because there's a fairness factor. You have to do it all in, or in my mind, none at all. I'm sorry, but that's why I think that the second one is a more fair and equitable one for the district. But again, we have no idea what the liabilities fiscally are going to be to this district still, if we do that. We understand now that the costs have been reduced to roughly 32 and 34.
About an average of 3,000, so it'd be about $12,000.
Right. So, I mean, I think and that's come down considerably, and that is for the four uses of the fields, right? Which is a considerable reduction to where we were whenever this first was brought to the attention of the district. So again, not knowing what it is going to cost us, not knowing what the fiscal liability is going to be, is the thing that is most disconcerting to me. But right beside it is the equity to everybody else in this district, or people who want to use district fields but feel that they don't use them now because they can't afford them. And there are people who do that. I mean, I've had calls. I haven't called the permit office. Thank you.
Mr. Sumter.
Mr. Weiss, can I withdraw the second?
Yes, you can always withdraw your second.
And the only reason I'm doing it because the second motion is less specific than the first, and I think would open up more problems or concerns of the way it was worded specifically. I would withdraw the second if the first motion was restated, except it didn't include the pools. But at this point, I'm withdrawing the second. That second motion.
Is there a second to the motion? Motion dies for lack of a second. Is there any other new business that requires board action?
But are we going back to the first motion? Mr.
at this
Brentley,
point.
can you go back to the first motion without the poll?
I don't know what you want from me at this
I
point.
want you to go back to the first.
I don't know what do you want?
Go back to your first motion where you identified each element that would be used, that we would need, that would be a part, please.
What is that?
Mr. Weiss, read the first
Well,
motion.
I don't know that I can read, I mean, I believe that the first motion was stated, it's many, many pages back in this transcript by now, but it seems to me that the most expeditious way to get this to a point of moving forward is to, you have a motion that was made relating to fields, waiver of fees, for an 8-week period, with requirement of two city police officers or certified security officials, inspection before and after the games. And then there was a mention of pools. If Mr. Bentley is prepared to indicate on the record here that the first motion he made is restated without reference to the pools, and there's a second, the board can consider that motion. So I guess my question, Mr. Bentley, is you willing to do that?
Of course, Mr. Weiss, and
Thank you.
yes. What do you want, tell me what to do, Mr.
Well, you just did it.
Okay, easy one. Okay.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Discussion on the motion. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Bentley,
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi,
No.
Mrs. Fink,
No.
Dr. Hawley,
Yes.
Mr. Eisler,
No.
Mr. McCray,
No.
Ms. Shealy, Mr. Sumter,
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda.
No.
The motion fails.
Is there any other new business that needs to be brought forward for vote? Mr. Bentley?
Yes, I have another motion that I mentioned at the agenda review that I wanted to bring forward. And, but what I'm going to do, Dr. Lane, since you pulled the memorandum of understanding with EPA, and we are scheduled to have a meeting next week that is open to the public, that will be held where?
The meeting will be here, Mr. Bentley,
Okay, downstairs in the main conference room?
in conference room A.
Okay, and so the public, viewing, public watching can come in and sit and listen to that music?
Absolutely.
That meeting as well. Well, then what I'll do is, that's just the motion I wanted to put forward to offer some assistance, financial assistance to the EPA committee. I'll hold that and share that at our meeting, and hopefully if we're going to be including some items that will be coming before us in September, we may be able to include those items in that particular agreement. I do have, that is the only item that I have to vote, that requires to vote on.
Thank you, Mr. Bentley. To be good stewards of all of our time, if you could get that in writing, whatever motion you're going to make to us prior to agenda review, we can vent it there and then not do what we just did tonight, because we could get all our questions answered. That would really be helpful and make us easier to support what you're trying to accomplish.
I can appreciate that. Madam President, you have to also be very, very aware of the difference of treatment of certain board members versus other board members. Each and every time that I make an attempt to bring something forward, there are often different rules and regulations that are sprung up that I must follow.
Everybody's asked if possible to go through committee, to go to agenda review so that legislative, we are able to take action.
Let me just remind you, just 3 months ago, Ms. Shealy introduced the item dealing with the unions and the teachers. Did not go through a committee. It was put on the floor here. I did not even see the item. We did not vet it. It was placed on the floor because Mr. Eisler wanted it, he agrees with it, and so it just simply moved through the process. You did not challenge him on the floor. You did not challenge the process. In fact, it was placed here, it was voted on, and it was moved forward. And all I'm saying is that my line of questioning for that particular item was because we did not get an opportunity to talk about it. It was not presented anywhere. It was the first time for all of us.
And I hear what you're saying, and so for all of us to be good stewards of all of our time and to allow us to make the best decision possible for the city of Pittsburgh and the school district of Pittsburgh, that all of us should be mindful whenever possible to vet through committee, agenda review, and legislative, because truly, by the time we're getting to the legislative meeting, the best use of all of our time is to have worked all this out so we can come in and say, yes, let's go for it, because we've already had all the discussion. And so I'm asking for your support of your fellow board members to help us work. And will there be times we don't do it? Absolutely. And maybe one time it'll be you, and one time, the next time, maybe it'll be Ms. Shealy. But I think we need to intentionally try to work through a more feasible process
And in closing,
and to reduce your frustration.
I'm pretty much used to that. The issues of race continues to be the main issue here. I am used to that. And it's unfortunate because this is why poor children and African-American children have such a hard time succeeding in this district. Simply because, you notice I don't respond to any of the ridiculous. There's just no need. And so that's why when you have individuals who can say the kinds of things that we've heard suggested around this table, just keep in mind the same individuals are creating and establishing policies that employees must follow and school and kids must follow as well, and that's part of the problem. It makes absolutely no sense. That's why it was important for the city to hear what racism sounds like. We
I didn't know Mrs. Shealy was an African American.
I want to finish.
I'm confused.
And it's important to hear the line of questioning, especially when I introduce, and listen, I'm so used to it. I'm listening to the rules as they're made up. We talk about, just in this incident here, you know, we've had Mr. Eisler, my colleague, who fiscally responsible. We built an addition on the Colfax, ran over hundreds of thousands of dollars, fiscally responsible. Redirect dollars from out of the African-American Hill District, took them kids, stacked them on top of each other like slave ships on dry land to add an addition on to Colfax. You didn't say nothing
Mr. Bruntley,
about being fiscally responsible.
do you have an item for us to vote on?
I don't have any more
Good,
items, but I
we
do
have
have
it.
other items to mention.
Okay, well, right now, we're on things that require board action. Does anyone have anything for board action? No. All right, go ahead. Any announcements?
Yeah, I have some announcements that I want to mention. There are a couple of things that are coming up, and I want the community to know. And it's really important when you talk about the strength and being able to stay focused, especially around this table. And so my attempts will continue to be focused as I have for the last 14 years for this district. Starting in September, the 2nd of September, that's Sunday, every Sunday at 8:30 in the morning, there will be a new show that will begin to talk about some of the positive things in this district. I will be hosting the show. It's called Roll Call, and it's on KQV 1410. The first guest that we're going to have on is Nina Sacco, principal of Perry High School, and she will talk about all of the positive things that went into making this so-called merger a success for Perry and Oliver. Actually, we're doing away with the term merger, and I shared that with Dr. Lane as well. We're referring to this as now the creation of the North Side Super High School, because now all of the programs that will be offered to those students, it's like having a super high school, the languages, the arts, and all of those kinds of things. So that will air every Sunday starting in September for the month of September, October, and November. Secondly, working closely with the parents for the first week of back to school, which is the 4th, Tuesday the 4th, 6 o'clock a.m. Remember, we're at a super questionable early start, but at 6 o'clock a.m. in the morning is the first official week for that school. We will be gathered in front of the school, 6 a.m., and we will be forming a prayer circle to put our prayer on the beginning of the school and the staff and the teachers. We're not accepting the few mumbles that we're hearing from adults about this will never happen, there could be problems, there's going to be this, we do not accept it. So I will be calling on my sister and brother from another mother, and we will be there embracing, and we're going to pray over that building before the first official school week would start. And then at 6:15, we will form the actual circle where we will say some supportive things, and then we will then form the first Pittsburgh Public Schools receiving line to welcome the students from 6:30 to 7:30 in the front entrance of the school. So any and everyone is more than welcome to join us there. We're excited because of the different community individuals who have stepped forward to help us. We all believe the same thing. A wonderful meeting today where we all stood together, black and white, Mr. Eisler, together, united, to say that we're going to work together to make sure that we embrace this school and that nothing happens and that every kid in here is equal and that we will fight for equality for all the students. So we will be doing that, and I am hoping that there will be some that will join us. The final thing I want to mention is what I'm calling the Brentley's Back to School Pointers for Parents. Number one, parents, when you're returning your kids to school, turn the car radio off. There are cars now with theater speakers inside of them. 2 or 3 minutes of whatever you have on that radio can destroy that kid and can create a major problem in his or her ability to learn. Number two, students, to the parents, students need at least 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep to be able to perform at their top level. And so to those parents who are watching, I'm asking that you turn that TV off at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, put that kid in bed, and then give him or her the opportunity to get a good start. And the final thing is, students are always proud when they know that their parents are active, coming out to the communities, coming out to the meetings, volunteering, and occasionally showing up in the classroom. And so I'm asking that our parents get on the right track and our parents do what's necessary to get the school year off, because this, in my opinion, will be one of the biggest challenges, this year will be one of the biggest challenges that we have faced in a very, very long time in terms of getting off to a good beginning start for the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruntley. Mrs. Khaleesi. Mrs. Fink.
I would just like to invite everyone to come to the Corn Fest, which is the annual festival that the Carrick Community Council and the Overbrook Community Council put on. It is in Phillips Park. It is on Saturday from noon to 6. Phillips Park, the part of it that's right across from the gym end of Carrick High School. And we have dancers, we have musicians, we have food. It's a bouncy house, the art cart, everything that'll be fun for the kids and the adults. A lot of the stuff is free, and the food vendors are all nonprofit organizations. So come on up, you're all invited, and we'd love to meet you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Dr. Hawley.
Yes, my question is, I'd like to ask Mr. Camarda, the parents and community members from the Sunnyside School would like to have one of the playgrounds that's left over from one of the closed schools. Is that possible for us to get up there?
We'll look to see what we're able to do. I think we're trying to move another one for early childhood out of the clear. We'll look.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mr. Eisler.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. We've been receiving a lot of information this week about back-to-school events, and I just hope that parents get on our website. We do have a lot of data on our websites about the back-to-school events at all the schools. And again, Dr. Lane reminded me a couple weeks ago that the nature of this work is that on September 4th, actually before that, there will be 26,000+ kids entering the school, and I think that the staff of this district has been extraordinary in the work that they have done in the past, and I look forward to it again this year, the great work. And again, I think that the parents of the city of Pittsburgh and the taxpayers can be proud of what Dr. Lane and her team has done, given a lot of the cuts in education. We're really maintaining quality and have stretched everything to see that we can serve as many children as we can, especially in our early childhood program. I'm just looking at Dr. Talaferro, and this may be your last legislative meeting. You will be missed. I worked with a number of parents who had children in her schools, and you are a good person, and you have worked with a lot of children, and we're going to miss you a lot. Your last legislative meeting, I might add. Thank you, Mrs. Asuda.
That's why she's smiling. Mr. McCray.
Just a quick note, this is not just the school district's 100th anniversary. This is the 100th anniversary of the Allegheny Observatory, and they're having a special screening of the movie called Undaunted this Saturday, August 25th, 8 o'clock in Riverview Park. Those of you who don't know what Allegheny Observatory is, cool telescopes. I saw other galaxies in them, they're really great. You know, you can get the Mars Lunar Rover on that thing too. Okay, my head's in the clouds, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. I just want to remind everyone that there's going to be an equity plan workshop on Monday, August 27th. The workshop will begin at 5:30 p.m. in Conference Room A, located in this building, which is 341 South Belfield Avenue, Pittsburgh, PA 15213, right across from the Cathedral of Learning. The meeting is open to the public, and for more information, I'd suggest that you go to the website, the Pittsburgh Board of Education, the school district website, to get more information about that. But again, that meeting is open to the public, and it'll be on Monday, August 27th at 5:30 in this building. And as always, please invest in our children's future. Give to the Pittsburgh Promise.
The lemonade thing on Thursday. Is it a lemonade social or something this Thursday in the courtyard? Lemonade stand? Again, for the Promise.
Okay, Mrs. Shealy stepped out of the room for a minute, and I'm not sure if she has any announcements or not, so if she does, we'll let her make them at the end of the next meeting. If there are no further announcement, motion to adjourn. Eisler, McCray, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, give us a minute, and we will move on to the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit.
Oh, let's go.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Scalise.
The stenographer says let's go. So, I'd like to call the August 22nd, 2012 meeting of the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit to order. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley? Here. Ms. Scalise is absent. Mrs. Fink?
Here.
Dr. Hawley? Here. Mr. Eisler?
Present.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Ms. Shealy? Ms. Shealy's here, but she stepped down. Mr. Sumter?
Present.
Mrs. Azuda?
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Will board members please take a look at the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? Eisler, McCray, all those in favor? Opposed? All right. Committee on Education, submitted by Ms. Shealy and her committee. Are there any questions that were not addressed at agenda review? Committee on Education, all right. Seeing none, Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley? Yes. Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy? Sorry. Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Let's move to the committee report on business that is before you, submitted by Mrs. Calesi, Business Chair, and Mr. McCray, Finance Chair, and their committee. Are there any questions that were not addressed at agenda review? Seeing none, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink? Yes. Dr. Hawley? Yes. Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We will now move to the personnel report that is before us. Are there any questions or comments on the personnel report? Seeing none, may we have a roll call, Mr. Weiss?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Hawley? Yes. Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Are there any other items to be brought before the board at this time? May I have a motion to adjourn? Eisler, Fink, all those in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone, very much.